This is the ultimate guide to Chaser for Resolume. Chaser is a plugin from Hybrid Constructs that makes it super quick and easy to make screen bumps and chases inside Resolume. Essentially flashing different sections of the screen in sequences to the beat. This can be an extremely useful and impactful effect to use in your shows for building energy, accentuating musical moments, or adding variety to your looks. If you don't have Chaser, now is a great time to get it. Before you get started with Chaser, you need your advanced output all set up and ready to go. If you need help doing that, I have a video where you can learn that process. Or if you just like to follow along with the demo today, I have an XML that you can download in the description as well. Be sure to stick around till the end. There's a lot of good info in this video and a bunch of bonus tips along the way. Alright, let's jump in. With Resolume open up Chaser. It should automatically load up your currently active input map, but if not, just choose File and New. Let's take a quick look at the interface. In the center, we have our canvas, which has all of our slices displayed. On the right side, we have our stage menu, which is a list of all the slices available. And at the bottom, we have our sequencer. Chaser works like a step sequencer. You choose a step or beat in the sequence and turn slices on and off for each step to create patterns. Let's take a closer look at the sequencer. You have 16 sequences you can set up, and each can have between 1 and 1024 steps. You can switch between sequences with the arrows or by typing in a number. And you can rename them to stay organized. You can add or remove steps with the plus or minus key, or type in the desired number. You can select a step by clicking on it, or using the arrow keys to jump to the next or previous step. Now that we know our way around the interface, let's make our first sequence. Select the first step and click some slices to add them. Select another step and click different slices to add those. And repeat across all the steps until you have a pattern. I find that it's generally best to keep your sequence length the same across all of your sequences. So I usually just stick with the default 16. You can change this and do whatever you like, but I do recommend sticking with musical increments for the most part. 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on, so that your sequences match up with musical phrases. If your pattern is shorter than the total duration, that's no problem. This sequence is only 8 steps long, so to extend it to the full 16, I can click and drag a step to copy and paste. Hit play to play through your sequence. For a shorter sequence, for example, just these two, click, drag, and hold to extrapolate that copy-paste across those even increments down the whole sequence. Let's take a minute to move over to the stage portion of the interface. If you have too many slices or your slices are getting in the way and you need to focus on a certain area, you can use the stage area to show and hide slices from the canvas. This will not affect your advanced output at all. This only affects what is visible inside of Chaser. While we're at it, let's also talk a little bit more about the canvas and the ways we can navigate around. You can pan around by holding the space bar to activate the hand tool, which is also located here. You can zoom in with the scroll wheel, or by pressing Control plus or minus. And then use this button here to fit the stage back into your canvas. Let's also talk about some tools and techniques we can use when creating our sequences. Clicking slices individually to turn them on and off in a step is cool and all, but there are some more advanced tricks and techniques we can use to be much faster. Clicking and dragging a selection box will flip the state of all slices inside the box. Holding Shift while doing this will turn them all on. Holding Control will turn them all off. Holding Alt will turn them off in the slice list to hide them. You can also paint slices by clicking on one and dragging over others to flip their state. Or you can invert or clear a step with the menu. Edit, invert step. But wait, there's more. There's a tool inside Chaser that lets you go even faster for those times when you really can't be bothered to make your own patterns. I'm talking about the factory. Over here, you'll find the factory, which is a function that auto-generates patterns for when you really can't be bothered or just need a little inspiration from our robot overlords. You open it up and screw with the settings until it does something cool. It activates this grid that is used to calculate the patterns. You can adjust to better fit your map by clicking and dragging. Hover and press delete to get rid of lines you don't need. And alt drag to add lines if you do. Alright, now that we know how to use the tools inside Chaser, we just need to make a bunch of sequences. Remember, think musically. Try to replicate some of the rhythms and patterns that you hear in the music you're performing with, and include a variety of patterns. I like to make sure I have some big quarter note patterns, some eighth note chases, and some 16th or 32nd note chaotic random patterns. That way, I can build energy and match up with all the different musical moments I might encounter during the show. Chaser is saving as we go, so no need to worry about that. But if you do need to work on multiple shows at the same time, or save a backup, or save this to share with another VJ, you can go to File, Save As to do that. You can also export your input and output map here for some sexy pixel map images. Alright, now that we have a bunch of sequences set up inside Chaser, let's jump into Resolume and see how we actually use this. If you've learned something so far, please like the video, subscribe, or share it with a friend who could use this information. Appreciate you, bud. There's actually 6 Chaser effects. Let's start with the first one, the basic Chaser effect. Inside Resolume, we can search for Chaser. Now you can put this on the composition, a group, a layer, or even an individual clip. The way I like to use it usually is on a layer, so that's what I'll demonstrate right now. And add it to our Chaser layer. To demo, we'll just add a solid color real quick, and we'll set our scaling to mask mode. And then you set the sequence that you'd like to play through. You can see it changing right here. And we're going to animate through the step. And we can go ahead and automate that with a BPM sync. Sweet. You can adjust the amount of beats if you want to change how this is timed out. Use the ×2 or divided by 2 to speed it up, or use the speed modifier. You can further dial in the look with the echoes parameter, which leaves steps on overlapping the next X amount of steps. So this has a couple of steps playing at a time. Now we've got like 3. You can also mess with the sustain and release, which adjusts the opacity fade curve of each step, how long it stays on fully opaque, and how long it takes to fade off. Next, let's take a look at bumper. This is pretty similar to the standard chaser effect, except instead of animating automatically through the steps in your sequence using an automation, we're going to manually bump through them using the previous, next, or blast button. Bumper is great for tapping along to a unique melody or rhythm pattern, or for getting your fret again impression on. So you can see we have similar settings here. We could select a sequence. Because we're not using speed or BPM to automate the animation, we need to tell bumper how fast each step should be by using this speed slider. And we just bump through using the next or previous buttons. It's a lot slower. This is a lot faster. And we can hold blast to just have these little blasts of activity where it animates semi-auto as we're holding the button. The next effect we're going to look at is called random, and it does pretty much what it says it does. It selects random slices from your sequence to play back randomly. Let's pull in a random. We'll mute bumper. You have the same mask or fill setting, and you can select either all slices or from a specific step, which then opens up these settings where you can choose a sequence and a step, and it will choose random slices from that step. Again, you have the speed, and you also have a max number of slices. So you can have only one slice on at a time, or you can have 7 slices on at a time, or anywhere in between. And we've seen these before. We have echoes to kind of overlap those a bit more. We have sustain and release. So that's random. The next 3 are a little bit different. Let's start with outliner, which is actually a source, not an effect, that you use in tandem with chaser and is part of the chaser package. So under sources, we can search for outliner. If we drop that as a clip, you can see that it generates outlines for all of our slices. Similar to what we just looked at with random, we can select all slices or click step, which allows us to restrict this outliner to a certain sequence and step to choose from. Let's just go with all. We have a width which we can grow, and this grows only inside the slice, which is really nice. You don't get any overlaps this way. And it generates a white slice, which you could of course colorize. Now we can use this with one of our chaser effects. Let's just use a regular chaser in mask mode. Now it uses chaser as a mask to show these outlined slices in our chaser pattern. Super cool. Next up is an effect called tiler. It divides up all of your slices into a grid pattern of tiles and creates these generative patterns that flow through them and can create some really interesting effects. Let's grab tiler and drop it on, and you can already see kind of what it's doing. It's created all of these small little subtiles inside of our slices, and it's making these little generative like bug patterns crawl through them. Some of this is familiar. We can choose all slices or a specific sequence and step, of course. We can change the tile size. You could do this as some division of your LED tile size so that it all matches up in a nice grid. So using this on a solid color isn't so great in sample mode, but using it on a piece of content can create some really interesting effects. But pattern is where this really shines. It opens up all of these different parameters that you can just go kind of crazy with, change the seed value to get different patterns. You have some different color values. You really just screw with these until you get something interesting. Lastly, let's talk about sampler. Sampler uses video to drive the chase pattern by sampling pixels underneath your slices to change the color and brightness of the slice, almost like pixelating your footage down to 1 pixel per slice. Once again, we can change the selection from all to step if we want to restrict this down to a certain area. And we can change the sample mode from center, average, or blend. Center samples 1 center pixel and is pretty high contrast in its result. Average samples the center and the 4 corners and averages them, which is a slightly less contrast result. And blend samples 4 corners and blends between them, which has this kind of smoother gradient look. You can also choose a color mode and decide whether to use color or just luminance. All right, so that is Chaser. I hope you learned something. Be sure to try out all kinds of different source material inside of your Chaser, not only solids, outlines, or VJ clips. You can also use effects clips as well. I think saturation can have a really nice effect. It's a little bit more subtle than using a full-on color, but it definitely adds a little bit of intensity. Brightness and contrast can have a similar effect. It's a little bit more subtle than a full white, but still impactful. You can even try out glitches and things. It can be interesting to add those effects only to certain areas of the screen. Invert RGB is another good one. And even some RGB effects can have a more subtle but interesting effect when they're only applied selectively to certain areas of the screen. So get creative, have fun with it. I love this effect. I use it all the time. Check out the link in the description. Download it, play with it, learn it, and use it. All right. Thanks for watching. like, subscribe, share this video with a friend. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Peace.